welcome to A Web of Stories. My name is Melinda and I'm here today with a book review. This is actually the second time I filmed this because apparently the file was corrupted the first time. Maybe the extra time to think about this will make my thoughts a little less scattered. I am going to be reviewing Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. This is historical fiction and it was first published, look up the date here, on April 28th, 2020. So why did I read this book? Well, I'm going to do a slight irritation that I had. I live in Oregon and I'm always interested in stories about the Oregon Trail, and I would like to read the little blurb that's at the beginning of the summary on Goodreads, okay? It says, in this epic and haunting love story on the Oregon Trail, a family and their unlikely protector find their way through peril, uncertainty, and loss. And that sounds great, right? Like if you're looking for a book about the Oregon Trail, that's fabulous, right? One little problem. It's not about the Oregon Trail. It's actually about the Overland Trail. So this is not a huge deal because the Overland Trail, for a big stretch of it, is both the Oregon and the California Trail. But this family is not going to Oregon. They're going to California. So they're on the California Trail, not the Oregon Trail. Oregon and California are two different places. Just saying. Not really a huge deal because the bulk of the action that's on the trail in this book takes place on the stretch of the Overland Trail that is both of them. But it was just a little bit of a slight irritation for me. Not really affected my rating or how I felt over the book. It was more frustration with Goodreads. So let me give you a little bit more information about it. This book has a 4.4 rating on Goodreads, which is very high. And it was a nominee for the Goodreads Choice Award for Historical Fiction in 2020. Goodreads also says that it is set in Oregon. Absolutely none of this book takes place in Oregon. Most of it takes place between like Missouri, Idaho, Montana. It does not even go into Oregon. There you go. Again, my irritation with that is not with the book. It is with Goodreads. Okay, so let me tell you about this book. So the setup for this book is that there is a family who is heading to California, and we meet them at the beginning of the book. One of the two main characters is Naomi, and she is a young woman. She's a young widow, but she is traveling with both her family and her deceased husband's family to California. And they're starting in Missouri, and in Missouri, she meets a man named John Lowry. John Lowry is the son of the man from whom they purchased their mules for the trip. And there's an instant connection. And John Lowry his intent is to travel with their wagon train to Fort Kearny. Fort Kearny. And then his initial intention is to come back to Missouri at that point. That wouldn't be much of a book. He decides at that point to continue. Spoiler, very mild spoiler. So they're on the wagon trail, things happen, and then something happens, and then there's a big thing, and then there's a resolution, which I'm sure is such a great summary, but I really don't want to. You don't need that much of a setup for this. It is a wagon trail story, something happens, and to get into that something at that point would be a spoiler. So let me talk about what I liked about this book. This is the second book by Amy Harmon that I have read. I can't remember the name of the first one, but it was described to me as like Irish Outlander. And I enjoyed it. It had an element of magical realism in it. And I liked her writing style. And her writing style is just as pleasant here. It's very smooth. It's very readable, and it is poetic. So I like her writing style. I think she has a good, strong voice. I also really appreciated that Amy Harmon does a great job of describing the trials that a lot of the people on the wagon trains faced. So there's a lot of, death and cholera and diarrhea. And it's a hard trip. I mean, I don't think we understand now in the 21st century how hard the Overland Trail was. So I really appreciated that she did not shy away from some of the uglier parts of that. Now, what I didn't like about this book, as I said, this book has a 4.4 rating on Goodreads. I did not give it 4 stars or 5 stars. I'll get back to my reading later, but let me get into it. The first thing that I did not like about this book is actually the structure. You start with a prologue of like a big thing that happens. And then you go back in time to when the family is in Missouri and they're starting it. The problem with that in this book is it takes any anticipation out of the book because you already know what the big thing is going to happen. And so you just, instead of waiting to see what happens next, you're just waiting for that event you know is already going to happen. And I wish, honestly, I think if that prologue just didn't exist and what was in the prologue was put in the book where the event happens, I think the book would have had more of a pull for me. So that is just a structural issue I didn't like. My second issue is with the characters of Naomi and John Laurie. This book is told in dual narratives, so you switch between John's voice and Naomi's voice, and both are written in first person. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's a device that's used quite a lot, I've noticed, in contemporary novels. Not contemporary setting, but contemporary written novels. It's become very popular to do that, a dual or multiple narrative. And I'm fine with it. The problem here, though, is the voice of both characters is exactly the same. So I would be reading along and I would just all of a sudden realize I was reading for the past 2 pages in someone else's voice. Like, what was happening was Naomi recounting what she was seeing, what was happening. But in my mind, it was John, because there's no way, I mean, other than if I made a point, and I did have to do this, where I would say, okay, I am now reading through John's eyes. And then I had to keep remembering that as I read. I think if Harmon would have diversified their voices, so Naomi is going to speak differently than John is going to speak. And I wish that had been reflected in those narratives so that I could just pick up to any page and start reading and know who's speaking, which I can't do in this book. It was very confusing and very frustrating for me as a reader to have to go through that. My second issue with these 2 characters is this book is probably, I would say this isn't a historical romance. It is a historical novel with a strong romantic element. But there really isn't a strong romantic element because there's a term that people use when talking about romance novels, and it's usually not a good thing. And that term is insta-love. And that's what we have here. Like, they see each other in a crowded street in Missouri and they fall instantly in love. And I was done. I was like, no, I need something more than that. No, I want to see a relationship start and then grow, instead of just having boom, magic, they're madly in love, and then have things happen to them. So that was very ineffective for me. I also felt like the characters, especially Naomi, did not fit into the time that this book is set, which is 1853. I remembered. 1853. She did not speak nor act like a woman of that time. And as someone who reads a lot of historical fiction, who has a degree in history and is looking for authenticity in historical fiction, that bothered me a lot. So there was that. I will say, as for the historical element, this is, if you're looking about spice level, it is door just slightly cracked open spice level. Not completely closed door, but slightly cracked open door. At least human sex. In equine sex, it's a little more detailed. I'm not sure I needed that, but whatever. Now I know where mules come from. Or donkeys. I get mules and donkeys mixed up, but things are going on there. So I had a problem with that. My final problem, and this is a hard one to talk about because I think Harmon made an effort on this, but she wasn't successful. And that is the depiction of Native people. So there are a group of Native people who are depicted in a very positive light. Fabulous. And there's a group of Native people who are depicted in a very negative light. Which that in itself is not an issue because whatever, but the ones who are depicted in a very negative light are depicted how you would expect to see Native people in like a 1940s Western film. Yeah, in a very problematic way, a very stereotypical way. I find that very frustrating. And those characters, even like the native peoples who were in the positive light, if you looked at their dialogue, it made sense. It wasn't, there might be a language issue there, but those who spoke English, everything made sense. But if you look at the ones who are in the negative light, it's that very kind of stilted, me go, the way that what you would hear in a mid-century Western film, which is not good. The book I'm reading right now is written by a Native woman, and she does it before she even starts the book. She talks about this is the language pattern of the Native language, and this is why it's going to sound this way. And when she writes, it works, but when someone who doesn't understand that tries to echo that, basically all they end up doing is bastardizing it, and it just comes off as very problematic. So I had an issue with that. Ultimately, this book was not a success for me. It was not what I was looking for. I am looking for a great Oregon Trail novel. The fact that this was not the Oregon Trail is not an issue with me with the book. Again, with Goodreads, it was not with the book. Because the book is what it is. I'm not going to blame Amy Harmon because Goodreads doesn't know what they're talking about. But this was not, in my mind, a great novel. Now, I understand that my background in history, I look for different things than maybe a lot of people look in a historical novel. I understand that. I might be coming from a different place. Obviously, I am in the minority with this one. But I just couldn't get over my issues with this book. And what I did like about the book was not strong enough to outweigh what bothered me. So I ended up giving this book a C. Would I recommend it? Actually, I would. In fact, this book is going to go to some family members who I think are going to love this book, but they come to these books from a different place than I do. But this book was not for me. Also, if you're looking for the Oregon Trail, you're not going to find it here, really. But I do ask you, if you do know of a good Oregon Trail book, let me know, because I'm still looking. But anyway, this one was not a success for me, but they can't all be winners, and not every book is for every reader. So I don't know, maybe this is a book for you. It's obviously a book for a lot of other people. So there you go. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. If you disagree with what I have to say about this book, that's fine. Please tell me in the comments. I love to have discussions. Just I ask that you keep it classy. We all need to respect each other in this world. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.